Hello everyone, this is Parker Bovée, bringing you the A show, that being an E with an acute accent mark. Today is going to be, again, kind of another first in a hopeful long line of series, now live and in living color, in fact. So a happy one there for our visual listeners in addition to our audio listeners, varying a little bit by platform, but today being a kind of a first start and hopefully a couple different avenues, but focusing really on the applications of artificial intelligence in a vast number of sectors. But I think a key one for me in terms of personal interest and professional work is going to be in agriculture and food. And going to spend some time today kind of talking about a couple different application areas with a focus on kind of three subdivisions here. And these are going to be topics that I continue coming back to as we can kind of reference more case studies and more news comes out in terms of applications. But the three we're going to spend some time talking about today are going to be food processing, agriculture, and food manufacturing. And these are very broad topics, and they'll kind of become some clear subdivisions, but I'm going to bring to you 2 or 3 case studies from each one, and really try to bring some light into some of the innovations in these spaces, and try to proliferate, again, the kind of idea behind these interactions are to really proliferate some of the information and knowledge and technical expertise that I research and bring it to light in terms of a broader, more egalitarian, I guess, in a way, not to over-intellectualize it, but kind of trying to diversify and then disperse that information amongst people who may not be exposed to it regularly. So in any effect, going to start along with the food processing side. And the kind of first use case I want to talk about in terms of food processing is really a focus on supply chain. And the idea here being on the produce kind of applications, really being able to trace ripeness or optimal supply chain kind of timelines, really looking to minimize food waste. So being able to trace ripeness, like I said, reducing produce waste, and then also being able to apply this on the kind of middleman side, the supply chain, really focusing on the applications within supply line contracting and inventory expectations. So what produce offerers should be expecting, grocers, etc. And that kind of informs that in terms of ordering, kind of producing a more clear, transparent supply chain from all the way up to farmer down to end retail producer, or distributor and producer, I guess. So the focus here I thought was actually very interesting in terms of some of the news that I've been able to pick up in the last couple months. And that being somebody who is really integrated from farm all the way to retailer, and that being Nestle, the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate at this point. And really the interesting, development I saw for them was a new artificial intelligence informed analysis program that they are claiming reduced waste reduction by 15%, and also achieved a 60% increase in terms of production efficiency. And production efficiency, as defined by Nestle here, focuses on farm all the way down to retail. So being able to eliminate the 15% in waste reduction obviously translates to some degree of production efficiency, being able to sell more produce. And so their production efficiency, again, really focuses on being able to take a crop from its growth cycle all the way down to a retail sale. So being able to produce more than a 50% increase in sales, going from, say, 1 billion to 1.5 billion, very noticeable and very interesting, and not something, again, that it relies really too much on the agricultural side, something that's much more focused on supply chain, which is where I really think you're going to see a lot of the benefits of the applications here, and something that I keep seeing as I kind of talk to more innovators. Couple more examples. I'm going to start with the more corporate one again. We have 2 here. IBM developed IBM Food Trust, which is a contamination risk analysis program that focuses on exposure to things like E. coli or other viruses or potential food harms, trying to identify and reduce the risk of those foodborne illnesses And the science behind this traces somewhat of a contact tracing, and also somewhat of a contact exposure. So being able to look at what factories or assembly areas or general supply areas, supply chain sections are at high risk of contamination based on their both types of foods. So if you're handling heavily with say a pork or a food group, being able to reduce the risk of contact by trying to separate and diversify where those foods are handled. This also plays into supply chain improvements, mainly focusing on food waste. So IBM has reported a potential $150 billion per year in food waste reductions when applied at a global scale. Obviously, this isn't currently applied at a global scale and is still being kind of built out, distributed in a commercial sense. But I think the thing that's interesting when you compare Nestle and IBM is they're both focusing on supply chain improvements. And because they're so integrated on the food systems level, more so Nestle than IBM, but IBM is clearly more on the technical side. Both are taking a very hardline approach to improving supply chain efficiencies, and they clearly see it as a massive operation in terms of growth and potential for really lucrative growth and really lucrative return on investment if they can improve those supply chains. I'll be curious to see kind of how IBM takes their development with IBM Food Trust, if they're going to try to commercialize it in terms of a business-to-business software, or if they're actually interested in moving into the food supply space generally. I kind of don't see the latter, so I would probably anticipate this being kind of a software as a service move. The last one I wanted to kind of touch on here is more of a startup, and that's Cognex, so Cognex, being a company that uses computer vision algorithms and detection softwares to reduce product defects. So think of this as the grapes at the bottom of the bag that are mushy and kind of disgusting, have the splits in them, they're browning, or the strawberries that are kind of moldy, have that kind of white fuzz on them. The produce basically that nobody wants to consume, and that often deters consumers from purchasing it. Cognex is a company that kind of handles that all the way up from a farmer-producer standpoint down to the retail point. So once the produce basically leaves the farm, it begins being passed through a various line of company hands in terms of packaging, analysis, defect detection, all the way up until a retail sale. And they're going to work on the supply chain there to really focus on being able to apply computer vision, which is an algorithm that's trained on running through, I believe Cognex specifically has trained their data set on about 200,000 images, is what they market as, but being able to detect what the crucial flaws are in produce, what they're looking for, and then being able to train a algorithm to detect those, parse it through those selection criteria before moving it on, and either saying, no, this is not viable produce, or yes, this is viable produce, and then distributing it as such, putting one probably to some type of compost pile, etc. Or I don't know, I'm not going to assume that Cognex is composting, or distributing it for final retail sale. So kind of three innovations there on the food processing side that I found very interesting. Moving now onto the agricultural side, I think that agriculture is going to be kind of dominated in terms of the applications of artificial intelligence by really crop optimization in the sense of growth. Kind of on a report I did earlier in the year, it was very much focused on kind of a key areas of picking up metrics of crop failure or crop growth. And I think that this is very much kind of the use case here. You're really going to be trying to predict internal issues with crops. So think disease, proximity of weeds, pest intrusion, and then on a larger scale, kind of the environmental effects. So predicting weather patterns, soil moisture levels, precipitation, or frost. So really trying to look at what could impede, benefit, or harm crops at a high level, whether that be internally within the plant or externally. So a couple interesting examples here are Taranis, that being Taranis. This is a group that uses drones to analyze crops at an individual level. They also run it through kind of similar to Cognex, a computer vision model to detect issue areas. And the kind of benefit here is that it's unmanned drones. In terms of, boots on the ground, you can really do it at a remote level. And this kind of passes through, if you imagine crop lines, it passes through each one individually, scans them, and is able to detect, intrusion of pests or faulty growth rates in terms of comparative. If you have, one stalk of corn that's at 6 feet and the other one is at 2 feet, there's obviously something wrong there. And Tyrannus is very interesting because they have boasted yield increases of 7.5% in their initial pilot program. So very enticing and very alluring in terms of their potential benefits, especially as we kind of move into new agricultural climates, as our harvest cycle is changing. I'm currently in Sacramento, California, and it's 90 plus degrees for 2 or 3 days straight now, and it's middle to end of October. So the harvest cycle is very much changing, especially in North America. Other places I'm not sure. I just got back from Europe, and it's kind of a similar story. So being able to kind of have softwares and hardware systems as well that can be applied to understand kind of how crops are going to be affected by climate change, and also just generally, and being able to notice trends in that year on year. I think you're going to need the data for that, and Tyrannus is a great application of that, let alone its year on year annual boast of improving efficiency and production yield, let alone that. So interesting one to note there. Another company here is Blue River Technologies, that being Blue River Technologies. Apologies if I've kind of slurred that. I kind of have that tendency, but another company working on computer vision. So I think that this is something that you're really seeing in the agricultural space, is the idea of being able to take a crop at the kind of first glance, or run it through kind of a comparative analysis, being able to really give it the same eyes that a farmer would give it based on training over hundreds of thousands of images. Excuse me. So computer vision here used to apply herbicides to areas. So an herbicide here is something that kills unwanted organisms, that being of the kind of plant variety. So think weeds here, or rival crops, theoretically, if there was some seed transmission that was unintended. So the benefit here is that a company like Blue River Technologies, specifically them, has claimed that they use 1/10 of the industry standard for herbicides. And this is important for a couple reasons. Number one, it's a kind of cost benefit. If you're using less herbicides, obviously you're paying less for it. But a second one being, there's a rapid increase in herbicide resistance within a lot of crops year on year, and probably within the soils, though I'm not going to claim to be an expert there, but plants are becoming more resistant to herbicides in terms of a weed level. So the weeds that are being sprayed every year are growing to be resistant to them, so you're having to use increasingly more potent herbicides, or more herbicides generally, which, just generally speaking, is going to have a knock-on effect in terms of consumer consumption. A lot of herbicides are not meant for human consumption, and the process of washing them and cleaning them in terms of the produce that's produced after the fact removes a lot of it, but it's just not something that you want to be passing on to your consumers in the long term. So kind of, I'd say 3 kind of areas of focus here. Number one being a reduced cost of using herbicides. Think of it as a 90% decrease if you're using Blue River Technologies as a case study. Being able to use 1/10 of herbicides, that obviously has a knock-on effect in terms of decreasing by 90%. Also being able to just generally claim reduce herbicide use, and decreasing herbicide resistance. So I think you're ensuring a better health of your land quality, and this is more speaking to the farmers, being able to claim better health of land, and greater kind of land management practices, not having kind of that, you could claim eutrophication of water streams as runoff from herbicides increases, and that kind of goes back to the first point. Being able to use 1/10 leads to less environmental degradation. And then the last one, less obviously knock-on effect to the consumer. You're not going to have the herbicides in as high a frequency, and you're not going to have kind of the consumer issues or apprehension to your product if there was a higher herbicide content, even though that's not necessarily something that the US regulates exceptionally well. Just something that's very important in terms of a consumer care standpoint. So with all those, I think it's a pretty interesting trend that I'm noticing in terms of the last 3 examples in both food processing and agriculture, being the really interesting proliferation of computer vision technology and being able to identify kind of trends or issue areas, especially in Blue River Technologies case, being able to move from kind of an industry standard of mass spraying or hand spraying being the idea of putting on a weeding solution over your back, which obviously also causes certain kinds of cancer, depending on which herbicide you're using. This isn't all of them, but I'm trying to remember the name of the company that did it. I can't remember the name of it, but certain herbicides also cause cancer risk. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I believe, is one type. Roundup, I believe, was the one that caused that. But just being able to reduce that generally. So the best comparison for this type of herbicide use with that 1/10 industry standard, so about 10% of what would be normal in terms of mass spraying, you would have to use hand spraying. So sending somebody up every single aisle of or every single row of those planted crops and looking for and identifying weeds and then spraying them. This is able to use either a robotic system or generally a drone to identify them, then sending somebody to that exact location, or with the robotic system being able to identify with computer vision built in, or through a drone system, kind of a remote analysis if you want to do it by hand. But again, you could use kind of a computer vision technology within this robotic system, being able to identify the weed issue areas and then spray them through that robotic system before moving on to the next issue area. It's just much more efficient compared to hand spraying, while being a similar type of kind of focus, being able to identify issue areas by hand. But getting back to that larger point, kind of a very interesting trend with computer vision really rising in terms of the agriculture and food area. And this is kind of something that we're going to step away from now and step into food manufacturing, which is very much less focused on the image recognition section. The big use case here, I'm going to make the argument, is for improving flavor profiles and textures and aromas and analysis in the foods being created. And having done work in previous episodes on plant-based foods and the needs for improved textures and taste qualities, I'm going to offer some examples here. The first one being Gastrograph, who have a really big emphasis on formulation prototyping. And they're a very interesting company. They have kind of quantified ingredients and prototyping in a very interesting way. So the example they give on their website is of a kind of a fruit nut type bar, where they offer on regional analysis of kind of taste profiles, but also retail success rates given certain ingredient formulations. So their kind of market fit really is in as a formulation prototyper, who offer manufacturers areas of improvement for product taste and nutritional benefit, and also regional market fit. Like I said, they claim to have very specific algorithms tailored in a much more specific way than just country level. For the United States, for example, they have general consumer preferences for, say, the Southeast or the Deep South. Think Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, that area. And then all the way over to, say, like the Pacific Northwest, and then down to the varying areas of Northern and Southern California, the Southeast, think Arizona and all that, New Mexico. And each one has kind of a different consumer profile, which is a very interesting kind of market to explore. And again, one where you're kind of taking out the role of maybe a food consultant or critic in a lot of ways and moving that onto kind of an automated algorithm to kind of give you that information. So again, the example they have was a fruit and nut bar, where they show a 2% in decrease in salt use correlates with a certain rating of market success. So they use a 4 out of 7, which correlates to, a decently performing. It's competitive in the market, but it's not going to dominate in terms of taste and consumer interest. But on the flip side of that, a 5% increase in sugar correlates with a lower 3.25 out of 7 rating on the market success metric. And I think it's an interesting technology they've developed. They're going to have to, in my opinion, refine how they go about marketing this at a larger scale. And I think they're really targeting kind of a business to business fit with food producers. So it's not, the worst technology in the world. I think their kind of food success metrics are kind of interesting. I think where they would have more success is focusing strictly on kind of ingredient profile and less so maybe on market success metrics. I'm sure that they're all useful, but to me, as someone who is kind of focused more on the specific ingredients needed for a specific flavor profile, I'm not exactly sure where the market success metric is stemming from, although they do have these specific regional market variations. So again, all of this is generated from a series of algorithms tailored towards regional taste profiles, as well as kind of the formulations that go into them, having ingredients that are correlated with specific regional taste profiles. And the regional taste profiles are based on an amalgamation of all the ingredients and foods that are preferred in that location. So, to make a very concrete and easy example, California recently banned a number of preservatives in their foods. So any food with those preservatives listed would obviously receive a 0 out of 7 or some extent to that on their rating on the market success metric. So kind of something to think through. It almost seems like a good fit also for a regulatory tool, now that I'm thinking about that. So Gastrograph, very interesting, but someone who I think does kind of hits on this same profile of ingredient formulation in a bit of a better way is Notco, who are both a plant-based food manufacturer, but also, interestingly enough, a kind of a business-to-business provider, but also a internal consumer of an artificial intelligence focused platform, which is used to create and I guess alter their formulations. So how this was done was Notco went and consulted with both leading experts in the machine learning sectors of computer science, as well as chefs and food manufacturers to create on the food and chefs manufacturing side, or food manufacturing and chef side, create the exact flavor profiles and listing of categories and kind of the science behind those. This didn't stop at just, the chefs and localized level, but also extended into food scientists. So being able to really calculate exactly what flavor, texture, aroma really meant, and then handing that off to the computer scientists and machine learning experts who formulated algorithms for those uses and also discovery platforms. And then what Notco really did that was pretty groundbreaking in my opinion was being able to bring the two together frequently and kind of swinging back and forth, giving feedback from the chefs once a formulation had been given, and then feeding it back into the platform and the machine learning experts who continued creating algorithms. They have, I believe, it's over a dozen now proprietary algorithms focused on flavor and texture and aroma and all different subsets of that, ranging from umami to sourness and bitterness to creaminess, all within food. And what Notco does better than anybody else in the plant-based space is being able to parse a formulation through an algorithm and being able to say, well, we have this formulation which uses a chickpea for creaminess, but what you could do instead is use cabbage and a combination of pineapple for a more creamy texture that is not only perhaps cheaper, but also a better fit for this specific product, whether it be some type of a plant-based fish or a milk or something else. And that's an exact example from Notco and something that they discovered. They weren't the ones who, they didn't have a chef come to them and say, cabbage and pineapple is a great substitute for creaminess in food textures, but that was actually something that their algorithm identified. So really, I think the really interesting part about Notco is that they have these algorithms that are used to identify really unexpected ingredients and being able to make, groundbreaking strides in terms of the manufacturing side. But at the same time, they're also able to consult and license this technology out as a producer to companies like Kraft Heinz and leading food providers, Shake Shack, and create plant-based products either on their own and then selling them on, or straight to those consumers, or rather producers and restaurants, in a really effective and interesting way that only really Notco, to my understanding, has been able to explore. And all of this is coming from, again, artificial intelligence and algorithms that are proprietary and very refined from Notco. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up this kind of first initial dive into 3 areas, that being food manufacturing, agriculture, and food processing, and the artificial intelligence applications within those 3. Again, hopefully this will be a reoccurring series which I explore artificial intelligence and various areas of clean technology. But again, this was the first episode in agriculture and food, and hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you soon.